Okay, so I think we can start. Um, there's many of you here. Probably you didn't hear that tutorial is skippable and you can be somewhere else. But I'm glad that you come, and this is my talk. And let me start with a conversation with a tester from several months ago. So um, we were testing Frostpunk 2, and one of the playtesters after a session with a game were like this. Actually, it wasn't a child, of course, because that's illegal to test game on childs, and our game is for adults. And it also doesn't have this facial expression, but I felt it. Like, I knew that he is very angry on the game inside him. And he was complaining that he has no idea how to do this and that. And I asked him, okay, but didn't you see that information in the tutorial? Didn't you read the information, watch the movie and so on? And his answer was, tutorial? This pop-up thing? I turned it off as soon as the first one came in. And it's difficult to avoid this obstacle. So one solution is to make tutorial like that, a tutorial which is impossible to skip. This is a screenshot from Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, which is a great parody of in-game tutorials. And you will see that in this presentation a lot, because it's a good background. And a player cannot avoid a tutorial like that, but the issue is that they can avoid your game by turning it off. Yeah, so now let's switch to topic a little bit. It will be a quiz. So who knows what ribosome is and know a definition of that? This is in Polish because maybe you are familiar with a Polish term, ribosome. This is something that you all learned in school. And if you finished primary school, you should know it. I didn't know it too. This is a definition. This is a particle that is present in large numbers or all living cells and serves as the site of protein synthesis. And the full definition on Britannica Encyclopedia is even more difficult, with some strange words like prokaryotic and eukaryotic. So why I'm talking about that? It's not only about the difficulty as definition, but it is about how we are taught in school. Here is a little bit simpler definition. So maybe in case you won't learn enough about in-game tutorials, you can now understand that ribosome is small machine inside of your cells that is essential for growth and metabolism, and cells couldn't exist without it, so you too. We are existing because of ribosomes, but our school teaches information in a way that is quite inefficient, and most of us didn't learn how to learn in school. So idea is in traditional education, is to put as much knowledge as is possible inside our head and hope that the small percentage will stay in our mind, and hope that the small percentage is enough to call us educated. So today we'll talk about how mind is learning, about modern knowledge, about how our minds internalize informations and how memory works. Of course, it will be very simplified version of it, and the topic is very big. If you're interested in that, is called neurodidaktyka in Polish, and I think neurodidactic in English, I hope. We will talk about tools. So overview of tools that can be used to teach players in video games. And we talk about practical examples of good and bad practices. I will base on many games, and one of them, of course, would be my recent project. Hopefully, because you never know with learning. And I will be based on my last project, so Frostpunk 2. And Frostpunk 2 is a sequel, as probably you can see from the number. And this game is a society survival simulator. It's a game about managing city, a strategy game. So quite difficult game to teach players. We'll talk about why is that later on. And small disclaimer at the beginning. It won't be a full post-mortem of Frostpunk 2 tutorials. And the game just came out. I actually even applied for this talk even before it. And I tried to squeeze it all in, but it was like 2 hours long presentation then. So I focused on those pieces that I find the most beneficial for learning something out of it. But maybe next year, full-fledged postmortem. And we are still working on some updates and patches on this process, so it's still ongoing, as you probably know how it is with releases right now. Who am I? This is not my picture, but I always wanted to do that. I'm Adam Mirkowski. I'm also bald, and I'm a game designer. I work at 11-bit studios, as you already know. I have 8+ years of experience. I want to make games that are worth playing, as 11-bit studios happily focus to. And I worked on indie strategy game called 911 Operator and its sequel, on narrative FPS, co-op roguelike deck builder called Hellcart, sorry, think drunk, and society survival strategy called Frostpunk 2. And I also have a newsletter/blog about making games, and I will also put a summary of this presentation there in Comic Weeks. So if you would like, you can join at this link or search for it. I will come back to this slide on the end, so you might decide if it's worth it. And as every good movie, let's start with credits. So I was one of the people involved in the process of creating tutorials or learning experience, we may say, on onboarding. And as in many complex games, it was a team effort. So there was 2 guys that are real one-man's army. There were 2 of them, so it was very beneficial for us, Kuba Goranciak and Mariusz. There was a lot of support from teams of UX, gameplay, and scenario. That shows how interconnected the thing is and how many people it needs to involve to work. And supervision of it was by Maciej Sułecki, and game directors Kuba Stokalski and Łukasz were also involved in the process. Yeah, so let's move to this guy. If you have seen Star Wars, you probably know how the great teacher the Yoda is. The Yoda is not trying to push the information into the student, but it's a little weird guy that asks proper questions, and it's a real mentor that can help you in an efficient way. Why is that? The Yoda shares some things with this guy. It's Socrates. And Socrates described himself not as a teacher, but an ignorant. A person who is asking proper questions to go to the root of the issue and asking the questions so the people could realize what they actually think about the topic. And it is a method that I am familiar with thanks to my wife, because she is very into nature and wilderness, so there is a balance in our marriage. and because I'm a computer guy, but thankfully I heard about that Coyote teaching is a learning method that is totally different than what we do in school. Coyote is American equivalent. I don't know what the word is. Like, coyote is American fox. Like in Poland we have foxes, and in America the coyote is an animal that is perceived as a smart, kinda invisible, very difficult to track. And coyote teaching, it's a method that focus on asking proper questions, looking for clues, and encouraging your students not to follow your knowledge or leadership, but to actually look around and think about their own experience. So I think this is the way in which philosophy of learning should come in. And yeah, so my motto is like sparking curiosity. And traditional video games doesn't do much good with that. This is an example of printed manuals for games. No matter how much nostalgia you have for such games, it's not a very efficient way of teaching. And of course, there are some. This needs to be an honorable mention that with everything you can do a nice modern twist. This is from game Tunic, an indie game that proven that a manual could be interesting and could be a part of game mechanics. So I deeply recommend it if you are curious and don't know this game. But back to the tutorials, the most obvious attitude is some sort of making some sort of traditional lesson, split it into different parts and walking through all mechanics. And don't get me wrong, this is still a method that is okay, and often it's very difficult to propose something different. But what if we actually pursue players' curiosity? So here's an example. Now would be experiment with a movie. Let's try it. It works. Yeah, this is my favorite game. One of my favorite games, Portal. This is a great example of a game that have very minimal tutorial, and with first level walk you through all basics mechanics. So first you are entering the room with a portal which is already made. Then you just see like how the boxes are introduced. There is no info that the box should be put into a button and so on. There is just a puzzle behind in front of a player, and you need to connect all the dots. And then you can learn that the boxes could be moved through portals, and okay, I cannot switch it, but yeah. Then you can go and see the portal gun. It's presented in the next level, and the game doesn't set you with objectives like pick up the box, put it on the red button, press X to portal, and so on. It's something. Right now you can see that the portal gun is presented before player have a chance to actually use it. So it's a very natural thing to do later when you acquire it. So not only cake is a lie in a portal, tutorial is also a lie, because in my opinion, to play is to learn. This is evolutionary speaking. This is the reason why we playing. Like this is something that evolution invented, let's say, for us to engage with new experiences. So the short takeaway that could be taken for that is to set a goal for players instead of step-by-step instruction. And good news for us, our mind loves learning. So we have this is our mind, and there is a lot of complicated elements in there. So we have things like amygdala and hippocampus, and those elements are present in brains even before mammals existed. So it's a very old part of a brain that is engaged with a process of learning. Because more data is a higher chance of survival. So mind awards learning process with dopamine. So getting new information is a pleasure, generally speaking, like in social media, on internet. So why often we don't want to learn and are bored? And the paradox is that if learning increases dopamine, the more we learn, the more pleasurable that should be. And the answer is no, because of this guy, prefrontal cortex. This is some part of a brain that rates our choices and actually deciding if what we are learning is worth it or not. It's comparing cost with usefulness. So for example, learning to the exam might be very costly because there is a lot of difficult knowledge to comprehend, and usefulness sometimes might be, it's mixed, right? Sometimes it's very important to learn, but how much of this information you will use, you never know. Another example could be learning how to drive. Like, cost is quite high, it's complex process, but usefulness of that is also very high, because in the middle of busy road, you don't think about how was it worth it to take this lesson. You are just focused on comprehending information and learning. And there's multiple examples like that, like learning how to use a parachute. That is a rather obvious choice when you are in front of it. It's very useful to learn it before jumping. So what comes from that? If instead of studying to the exam, you learned, for example, all names of Pokemons from first generation, that because your brain decided this is more important. Don't ask me why. It's maybe your brain have some deep knowledge about that, but maybe it was an effect of this ratio of what is difficult, what is effective coming into your brain. So what comes out of it for us as a game designer is that it's easier to explain how to do something, that why you should do it. Like, why should be the most important stuff, and we should think about that even before teaching something to a player. Yeah, and another example is quite famous one. It's Half-Life 2, in which the player is blocked by saw blades, and he's learning how to use gravity gun and faced with the enemy in the same very moment. So next moment you can see, oh, it's short. Yeah, so next moment you can see the player just shooting with a saw blades, and this is a very effective way of learning. Just before this sequence, there's some enviro storytelling. You can see the zombie split it in half with a saw blade, so you already see that it might work like that. And enemy is triggered just when you are pulled out a saw blade from road. So it's very natural choice for you to just shoot it. And the interesting fact with that is that stress level normally evokes cortisol. So it blocks learning. When you are stressed with, I don't know, maybe losing a job or something, it's more difficult to focus and learn new informations. But on the other hand, when the stress is directly related with the thing you are doing, for example, you had a crash accident, like a road crash, and if you made some mistake, you probably will remember that lesson for the rest of your lifetime, because it was directly related with the stress, so it can be enforcing the situation. In video game, of course, stress is much lesser, but still, when the adrenaline comes in and there's a battle situation, there is some kind of a danger, you can remember the information better. And counterexample might be trying to teach player during, for example, a combat or high adrenaline actions about something else, like trying to convey some information about world building or some additional knowledge about leveling, let's say. Yeah. And the example comes from Game Maker's Toolkit. I just wanted to not forget about two good movies about tutorials that were great inspiration to this talk. Yeah, so on the other hand, the worst thing you can do is to make tutorials mandatory. Far Cry Strikes Back. So there is plenty of games that do that, and there is a plenty of players that are very angry with such an attitude because they are value freedom more than getting information in a plain way. Sometimes it's easy to present information in a way that it's not interrupting your gameplay. Like a lot of platformers, for example, display information about controls without stopping players. So you can just run past it. You can think about it. It can be irrelevant for you. This is something that you are not focused on that much. And in strategy games, this is a city skyline, but it's an issue with most of the strategy games. It's definitely easier to it's definitely more difficult to apply those principles because there is a few reasons why those games are more difficult to teach. So one of them is a longer feedback loop. And longer feedback loop is about how our actions meet with consequences. So in video game, in shooter, for example, you can just try to shoot an enemy and you can see the immediate result of it. And in terms of strategy video games, you may make a lot of mistakes, plenty of them, and not see your mistakes for the next couple of hours, like in a traditional strategy game, because the game have more inertia. They have a strategy as a part of their loop, so it's about long-term thinking. And yeah, and about solutions to that issue is one of them could be a short scenario or a chapter devoted just for learning, some kind of playground. And another could be a part of a game loop that serves as kind of exam, some kind of a test that is a gatekeeping moment that checks if player understand information or have enough skills to progress. Yeah, and let's come back to the Frostpunk. So Frostpunk have a prologue, and prologue is that kind of a test that I just mentioned, and also a short scenario that allow you to make some mistakes and learn out of it. But before we go into the details, a short interludium. So how tutorials in Frostpunk 2 works. And a starting point, like guidelines for making those, were to never block players' input. That's what we start with. Avoid obnoxious pointers like yellow paint stuff and big arrows pointing players, and respect people who just want to skip everything and just play. And so the co-learning tool was something on demand of the player. Player can open some sort of a Wikipedia, encyclopedia slash something like that, and it's describing different features by text and videos and images. We compromise in some areas, like we have pop-up messages that are present in main scenario, but they serve also as an introduction for a new set of quests or new mechanic. They have also a narrative role to open a new set of a story, let's say. And we also have a quest marker and blink animation that switches your attention toward some mechanics. Yeah, so let's go back to the prologue. So in prologue, we decided to put set of basic mechanics, like you need to expand the area, you need to build, you need to prepare for an incoming whiteout. So the moment of a bad weather, you need to learn how to gather food and how to stockpile it. And we cutted plenty of subsystems, let's say, and features that are present in a full game, like, for example, research, council, so voting mechanics, and many more, just to try to limit your experience to the most essential features in Frostpunk 2. And another thing in that tutorial is that you can die, and that's okay. That's something that people on Reddit are aware of, that learning comes with a great price. And yeah, on this screen, I need to drink some water before I will lose my voice fully. Sorry. Yeah. So the thing with this prologue was that we wanted players to be able to fail until they learn how to pass the first stage, and we need to make sure that before they will go into the voting or researching or interactive with the world of outside of the city, they will learn how to do the basics, like, for example, know how to economy works. And this is also a problem because of interconnected systems. It's difficult in strategy genre. It's difficult to explain one system without mentioning other. So, for example, in a prologue, we started with the attitude of cutting out currency. There is a in-game currency, nothing like pay to play, nothing with real money. But in World of Frostpunk, there are hit stamps, so some sort of money in this post-apocalyptic world, and you need to pay them for ordering your citizens do some public work. And we cut the currency out of prologue, but the issue was that players were learning this mechanic without an additional cost. So in prologue, it never cost currency, but then in a full city, it started to actually cost something. So it was impossible job to cut the system out. The issue was that it wasn't fitting narratively, so we decided to switch its name, but leave out the same icon, leave out the same mechanic to actually align those two goals, narrative goal and learning goal. And the solution for interconnected system is to put more attention to some sort of guidance system that is responsive to player behavior. So if player have issues with food, the people could come to him. And this is a first Frostpunk because this idea originated in the original game, but we reintroduced that in a sequel and even pushed it a little further. So when you have an issue with any problem in the city, factions may present you solutions that they aligned with their worldview. And this is a tool which we use to make sure that if players don't understand something, they can discover new solutions for this issue. And systems like that could be working differently also. For example, in Civilization 5 game, the advisor might comment that when you are building a worker and in that moment of the game, this action is pointless, you may got some comment that it's not that important right now and you should focus on maybe something else. It should be optional, so always provide player with a choice that you can just ignore it. And another problem with strategies is that they are less responsive. What I mean is that strategy of clicking around and finding out how things works isn't very good. So because the game are more complex and they are far more abstract than action experiences. So what is a great tool for solving that is contextual informations. This is example for Crusader Kings game, and everything that every term in the game you can put your mouse and hover over it. And what is great that you can also go through different terms inside of this tooltip to make sure that you understand them, so you can learn game on your own pace. In Frostpunk 2, we choose another path. Like in our case, we present a trigger inside of a tooltip, which displays you a tutorial for this particular feature with some sets of images and videos. And it's also a tool that could help you in any moment of the game, and you can learn those mechanics only when it's needed. Yeah, flow. This is something that is very well. This is a very well-known term in our industry, but it's associated with a gameplay and level design. And back to our adventure with a mind and how it works. Flow is actually very beneficial for learning process. So we actually remember things far more easily when we are in a flow state. So when we are learning something that is not boring and it's not too difficult. It's not an easy task to do in a video game because most of the tutorials are fairly easy. Players just starting their experience. It's tough to present some challenge in that. But there is a good example of a game which managed to do that, and it's Titanfall 2. So after a very brief introduction, the first challenge that you get is some kind of a test track, and then some set of a small level that you need to pass in a given time. So all the players need to actually speed up a little bit, and they're put into some challenge. It's not that difficult, but on the other wall, you also have a high score. So if you are a more experienced player, you can feel challenged, and you can try to actually beat the times of the best players on this level. And thanks to that, this tutorial is oftenly like speedrun, and there is a lot of YouTube videos when people are doing insane things with it. And yes, and it's a great example because normally tutorials are something that people don't want to come back to. So I would say that this is some sort of skill-based segmentation of players. So depending how proficient is a player with a given genre, the tutorial should be either a little bit different or provide some space to behave differently. Like these players of a Titanfall 2 could actually prove their skills, that they are very skilled in the first minutes of the game. Another example is just doing something like that, like Anno did. So we can ask players what type of experience they prefer, or in case of a long-lasting series like Civilization or Age of Empires, they're often asking, do you want to learn what is new in our series or everything from the scratch? And another aspect of that, of course, is putting players into the challenge. And yeah, backing to our prologue is something that we in our product, we don't have a segmentation of players in terms of their familiarity with a genre, because prologue is about learning a set of mechanics that were changed from the first game. So it didn't make much sense. We rather put people into some extra challenge, so they are more on the higher score. That's something that they are not very used to. But our main segmentation of players were difficulty levels. So in terms of difficulty levels, they are not called easy, normal, high, very high, but they are named in narrative way, let's say. So there's steward level, captain level, and so on, citizen, and nobody knows if the lowest level is the easy or normal. So people are not intimidated with the name, and there is a pop-up message that that encourages you, if you are a veteran of first game and want to have an extra challenge, to start on the second level. And yeah, tutorial is sometimes helpful, but as long as it's not necessary, some people will be will met a failure when the challenge in the tutorial is pretty high. So it was also a thing that we tried to do in Frostpunk 2, and tune it a little bit back down, because after release we decided that like on this flow chart, the difficulty level was a little bit higher than what we targeted for. And another thing, which is also well known in the industry, but we don't think about it much in terms of tutorials, is pacing. So it's a general order and rhythm of activities in the game, and it's not only about the gameplay, story, and levels, but also about tutorials. So what it should be. The most obvious answer is that way of pacing it. It's the traditional way, let's speak. So first you are learning all important info, and then you are enjoying the game, right? But unfortunately it doesn't work like that, and it comes from hardware inside of our head, and it's because when we got some information coming to our nerves, the first impulse is needed for reorganize, but it takes some time to work on that change, to prepare the cells for the next batch of information. So only after a break, neurons can actually respond for repeating the information. That means that if you are learning, for example, a new language and repeats the information 15 times in a row, it won't necessarily help that much. But if you do that every day for 3 times or 5 times, it will be far more beneficial. So learning should be like this lasagna. We should put the information, then have some break, and repeat the information, or learn some new knowledge only after breaks. And also applying the information to the new context is very beneficial for remembering it. So pacing of the learning experience should be more like that, when the red is some kind of either new instruction or mechanic or traditional tutorial, and the yellow is a unconstrained gameplay. And it's something that in strategies it's possible to do, because games tend to have 2 or more modes, and in Frostpunk 2 we have a story mode, which some people perceived as actually tutorial for the sandbox. Of course, it's not entirely true. The story mode is presented with a great narrative, and it's have a lot of effort put into that. But in terms of mechanics, we are presenting mechanics for the whole whole process of the game, whole playthrough. So the player first won't be bored with the game, and on the other hand, just to make this learning curve a little bit far less brutal. Yep. So repeating is very beneficial, and recalling the knowledge is also a trick when you are trying to remind yourself the information. It's better to try and think about it by yourself as long as possible, let's say. So not check in the dictionary what the word is that you are trying to remind yourself. And because of that, for example, in video games like this one, this is a Morrowind, when there is no map, no GPS, our mind remembers surroundings more vividly. So speaking of road signs, anybody knows a country? This is, of course, one of the many examples on our roads. And this is a very bad thing, not only for aesthetics reasons, but also for this reason. So cognitive overload. It occurs that we have a working memory, not only in computer, but also in our brain. And demands placed on working memory, how many things we need to remember, how many things we need to perceive and see at one moment, when its capacity is exceeded, that's something that happens with our mind. So in other words, it's like in situation in which there is everything everywhere all at once, and everything is for too much information and at one moment, and inconsistent design patterns like icons spread everywhere on the screen, and also too many simultaneous tasks or complexity, like all at once, and lack of intuitiveness, which didn't fit a picture, but it's also a very important thing. That's why in UX design and icons design, references from real life are the most easiest choice, because they will be perceived naturally by users. So either using references from real life or other interfaces make the learning process less difficult. And new and innovative is not always good. This is a very innovative idea for a volume control feature. But we should also add a cost of learning to the idea that we came with. This is the best one. I would just drink some water and you can enjoy that. Oh no. Okay, so repeating is important, right? Okay, thankfully I have a magic switch and we can travel through time. Cognitive overload, yeah. Oh. Yeah, here we go. Okay, but besides that, highlighting what is important and hiding what is not. Hiding could be used in games, for example, to hide some parts of UI which are not needed in the very moment. Like for example, when we're trying to teach player only one particular mechanic, like connecting two dots, maybe we don't need a pause menu button in this moment. Like we can limit what is not the most important thing. And highlighting is also quite useful. Like you all know that, like highlighting UI, visual blanks, and sounds. But it's also important when you are doing these boring text messages, right? Because this is a example of a text from a Frostpunk 2. it's not even that long, and it's quite fairly simple, but when presented in that form, as far worse than this, right? So use bold, use icons in the text, the colors if you are a game that have aesthetic space for that, and use separators and visuals. This is the key of that. So showing stuff instead of telling always works better. And it's difficult to build the game like Portal. There is not always a production space for that. There is not always a genre that works like that, but you can always can make some videos, right? Like it's just easier to show that to build something, you just need to click these three cells, and that's all. That's not a coincidence that people are searching YouTube for how to move past some puzzle and not reading that information from the text. Yes. So when you have this perfect learning experience, you should put it into the hands of players, and they will destroy it as usually. And yeah, and actually just don't wait until the experience is perfect, because it will never happen. Try to playtest as soon as you have something that is playable, and it should happen just after the prototype. This is also an answer for a question when the best when the best is to start designing this onboarding process, learning experience for your game. You should actually start. The sooner you start it, the better it could be. The more integrated with mechanics of the game vision itself it could become. And back to the thing. Right now it's planned. So let's repeat. And I was talking that setting a goal for players instead of step-by-step instruction allow them to explore the game by their own. They will think that this is their great idea to overcome the obstacle, even if you plan it carefully for them to follow the clues. Another thing is, before teaching something, it's essential to show why it's worth it, to provide enough motivation to learn, because without it, it is highly doubtful that players will enjoy it. You should remember that pacing of learning experience is crucial, and you need breaks between different pieces of a tutorial or just implementing new mechanics. And cognitive overload is something very important to remember about. So not overload the memory and perception of players with too many information at the same moment. Highlighting and hiding stuff as quite important, and could steer the focus of players to the elements that you are really the most important ones. And showing instead of telling always works better. And in terms of tools that you can use, there is actually, in my opinion, plenty of them, but it's not the most important thing, because you can just search them through the internet. You can put some references from other games, or just do some kind of a checkbox what is important to what you can have in your game, right? But the real reason that you need to understand the principles in our brain, how do we remember information, what works and what not, as you to understand what type of a tool you can use to which situation, and in which context, let's say. Yeah, and besides that, Besides that, the most essential thing is, as I said on the beginning, sparking curiosity. Like, just remember yourself from childhood when you were so excited about the video games that you even were able to just read a printed manual, which was boring as hell, but you were asking questions about how things works, what is important in the game. You are imagining stuff and try to spark this curiosity into our players, so your game will be interesting enough to learn. Thank you. That's all.